Good evening and welcome to a meeting of the Hunterdon Central Regional High School Board of Education. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media, consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and advance notice required therein has been provided. Meeting notice is also posted in the boardroom of the upper school campus, sent to the Courier News, Star Ledger, Express Times, and the Hunterdon County Democrat, and sent to the clerks of Delaware Township, East Amwell Township, Flemington Borough, Raritan Township, and Reddington Township. The public have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda. Can you please stand for a flag salute? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Heather, can I have a roll call, please?
Dr. Charney? Here. Mr. Davidson? Mrs. Hughes?
Here.
Mrs. Kellogg? Dr. Wynn? Mr. Nickel?
Here.
Mr. Richard? Mrs. O'Donnell? Here. And Mr. Panico?
Here. Before we get started, I do guys want to remind you that it is state law that we have to wear masks in the building. So if you guys could put those on, I'd appreciate it. I want to wear one just about as much as you do, but it is state law, so we do have to wear those while we are in campus here. Can I have a motion, or actually we're not moving these. So the first two items on the agenda next week will be the approval of the minutes from November 15th and November 22nd. Anybody have any discussion on those items? All right, hearing none. We have correspondence as filed in the business office. So Dr. Moore, I will turn it over to you for your superintendent's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Panico, and thanks everybody. Couple of items tonight and a couple of folks we're going to hear from on some interesting stuff as we continue our presentations from our departments, and also a long overdue presentation from Dr. Dan Butler back there to brief us on the results of his sabbatical, which feels like a long time ago, but COVID had knocked us off of, and I've been looking forward to him coming out and speaking to us, so I'll introduce him in a bit. I have a couple items just to go through tonight to give you updates on where we are on a few things. Over the past couple of weeks, we've experienced an increase in the number of positive COVID-19 cases, just like we did last year at this time. The number of students excluded for close contact has also risen, but it's still a very small proportion of students, at roughly about 50 students excluded right now. That means that on average, as you walk around campus, every third classroom or so that you pass by is likely to have like one student out. That's sort of how that's playing out across our campus right now as a result of close contact to somebody who has COVID-19. Currently, under the rules that we have from the Department of Health, unvaccinated students who are in close contact with an ill person have to be excluded from school for 14 days, and they don't any longer, under those rules, have the option to return earlier than that full span with a negative COVID-19 test. And this is troubling. This is the result of our region slipping from yellow into orange on the state classification system, and I have to say that it's frustrating for me and for all of us. For me specifically, my youngest child is home halfway through a 14-day exclusion herself. So this is hitting me left and right. Now, I'm troubled about this for a few reasons, and it's not because we're seeing an increase in cases. What's troubling about this for me is that one of the three metrics that informs our weekly classification, that color coding of green, yellow, orange, red, one of the three metrics is potentially inflated. And I share that tonight as a concern that superintendents have been discussing with the Department of Health over the past couple of weeks. That metric is the one that counts COVID-like illness. It's called the percent CLI. And what's happening is last year we had no flu, we had no rhinovirus, we had no RSV. None of those things were around. Those things are now happening right now in our community, and those symptoms are informing or piling into that metric. So that metric is a little inflated. I'm not saying that we wouldn't be in orange, but we have to recognize that this tool that we've been using is not functioning the way it was last year because of a different situation this year. So I'm frustrated about that. Second, we continue to see that students who end up at home as a result of close contact are very unlikely to come up positive for COVID-19 or develop symptoms. Same as last year. We're quarantining healthy students. You heard me say that 1,000 times last year, and here we are saying it again. I'm worried that these contact tracing protocols that we've received really overuse exclusion as an end result. And I don't pretend to be a public health expert, but I sure have gotten, sharpened my skills in that area over the past 20 months considerably. The unmistakable goal this year that I do have to talk about, though, from top to bottom, from the governor down to my gut, the unmistakable goal has been to bring students into school all day, every day, and provide them as normal an experience as possible. That's been the overriding goal this year. We've discussed the academic, social, emotional needs here many, many times. I have 7 HIBs to present to you in closed session tonight, so it's evidence enough that we have a social, emotional need for students to be in school. This exclusion protocol is working directly against our goal in that sense. And I have to begin to bristle at that. I'm working with professional organizations, particularly our county roundtable of superintendents, to advocate for a more sensible approach at this point. I think the 14 days is not fitting our current situation. Other states are exploring test to stay, in which students who are close contacts can continue to return to school if they provide a periodic negative test. I have to learn about these programs by Googling them because we are not getting any information from our state agencies about these programs. They don't seem to be looking into them. They don't seem to be exploring what the efficacy of these things are in other states, and so we're left to try and find out for ourselves. I don't know why, 20 months into the pandemic, that we're not getting that kind of information from our state agencies. I also, and you've heard me talk about this many times too, continue to ask for data that I don't receive. It makes no sense to me why I have to go to the CDC website and open up a spreadsheet to determine basic things like what's the vaccination rate of the youth in our county. I have to do arithmetic and proportions to figure that out. There isn't an answer out there just for that simple question. I have to text friends and partners at the hospital to get a sense of their utilization at various times because I don't have access to any metric that tells me how well the hospital is doing and how under or overutilized they are as they respond to COVID. So I continue to ask for these data, but I'm frustrated that they aren't just right at my fingertips. 20 months we've been asking for this. It was fine last year when we had data questions because we had really specific executive orders that told us everything. How many people could be at an outdoor gathering, how many people could be at an evening gathering. Now, however, I'm not mourning the loss of those executive orders, but we do not still, 20 months later, have the information to make informed decisions on our own. There's this thing that pilots talk about, flying by wire. Where you fly by the readings on your instruments because you can't see for whatever reason. I've got neither. I don't have the data to make decisions, and we don't have a view over some fundamental things that are just going on. So I have neither, and again, 20 months into this, I'm still being asked to fly blind in all of this. All of that said, I am really proud of the work that we've done this year. I have no plans to shut us down at all. I know there's some rumors in the community across our county, not just in our local area, but across our county, that the DOH was talking about shutting down schools. I haven't heard that from the DOH, and I have no intention of closing our school for any reason. That's not aligned with our key goal this year. So we committed to remaining open, no plans to shut down, even if we see increases in cases from here. We continue to have to balance that public health, educational, and wellness goal that we've talked about a million times here and which I've shown on the screen as a framework many, many times. This year's difficult, more difficult than last year in many ways due to this agency paralysis that I'm talking about in this extremely thin stream of data for us. Now, we continue to be committed to improve, and we're increasing supports for students who are excluded as a result of close contact, those 50 or so that I mentioned earlier. We had been relying on teachers and students to work together on alternative assignments and on the availability of after-hours virtual tutoring. Attendance in that latter opportunity, our evening virtual tutoring, has been very, very light. And we do also have reports from teachers that students are sometimes returning with little or no work done. So students need more of our support as they have to continue to keep up to date through any extended absence. So we're working with teachers now to make sure that they're equipped to invite students into classes during the day virtually when that makes sense. For example, if a teacher is doing a lecture activity and it would benefit the student to be present for that, we want to make sure that students can bring those students, that teachers can bring those students in. We're not planning, and we've talked about this many times over the past several months, we're not planning to return to full-time, fully live simulcast from our classrooms. We did that last year because we had to. Because when we came into school on any given day, 60 to 70% of our students were home. This year, that's not our situation. Again, 50 students are home right now. We also suffered from severe compromises in the educational opportunities that teachers could offer. You can only plan to do so many different kinds of things when you're accounting for all of that different context. People at home, people in school. So we had not planned, and we're not planning, to go back to a fully hybrid, fully remote virtual option. I think it would be irresponsible for us to mandate a one-size-fits-all approach for that kind of situation that we have right now, because the scale is just not warranting that kind of approach at this point. I trust the expertise and the dedication of our teachers to work with our students on an individual basis using all of those tools that I mentioned to affect plans for keeping up to date. Some additional things, our Block 5 tutorial, which is available every day. We're working on a schedule to prioritize virtual students in every department at least once or twice during the week, so that students have access to virtual tutorial from home. And we're also working on tools, including a planning template for students to map out their assignments in the event that they're absent for any extended period of time. Mr. Brandt's been working with some students on a draft template and has been getting some good feedback on that. I would welcome any effort of the board to join me and my colleagues across the county and across the state in advocacy for more communication about these other alternatives like test to stay, and more study of them to determine if they have efficacy for us here in New Jersey. I'd be happy to discuss all that with the board further if it would be helpful. I and my colleagues across the state are certainly weary. We often say that we're done with this, knowing that we're not quite done with this. But right now we believe that the current rules for exclusion are overzealous, and we're done with that. And we expect and challenge folks at the state level to start thinking about and offering us alternatives to 14 days, no test, no return. I don't make the rules on this, but I'm happy to join in on making some noise about it. So there's an update on our COVID situation. I have a few other items before I turn it over to Dr. Butler, and where's Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole's right next to him. CUSAC, the state's periodic review of schools. CUSAC represents another annoyance for us right now. This time-consuming project was waived for schools who were up on the list last year. Talk of a waiver for this year's list of schools, which includes us, is floating around, and there's some legislation moving through the Senate and the Assembly that would waive CUSAC this year, but it's not likely to land in time for us to not have to do a good amount of work to prepare for this review. So this week we have a committee meeting to review scores on a self-assessment. That's tomorrow. I think Mr. Davidson has been invited to represent the board in that meeting, and we also next Monday will have to likely pass, or I'll be recommending for you to pass a self-assessment so that I can submit it to the state. So we have work that we have to do on this, even though it may ultimately be waived in the coming weeks. So the waiver hasn't come quickly enough, but we're hoping that it does, and we're trying to do the minimum amount right now to meet various deadlines with the hope that this thing gets waived, because it's quite a project involving hundreds of documents that we have to produce for a visiting team of county Department of Ed officials. It's a ridiculous exercise right now. I don't mind saying it that way, especially since many of the metrics in this review are based on tests which haven't been given in 2 years. So difficult stuff. Tonight or Monday night, I would ask that the board assign Board of Ed members to 2 policy projects. We have an equity policy, which will fulfill one of the board's goals this year. We need some board members. We have our Racism, Equity, Diversity Committee that may be a good home for that, but I do leave it to the board to discuss that and roster that committee. The other is a revision to the counseling policy. We've talked about revising our counseling policy as that department works on a goal to reimagine its efforts in this new era of personalization and challenge that we have been moving into. So I'm selecting staff members at this point. There's been a posting out for staff members to assist in both of those projects so that we'll have a good, fruitful discussion with a lot of folks. I'll probably have names for you to approve next Monday night to roster those committees from staff. Some short things. We have some January schedule concerns to tackle for the board. We have our reorg meeting on January 3rd, and we have 2 other board meetings on the books. If we want to keep all 3 of those meetings, we have to adjust our committee schedule a little bit because our committee schedule runs up against our reorg meeting in a way. We have to push things around. Another option the board can certainly choose is to go to 2 meetings, the reorg, and then a later January meeting on the 24th, is it, Heather? On the 24th. And then that would leave the 10th open for us to have committee meetings that week. So we can continue to talk about that, but I do want to let you know that we'll need to work on that together to get a good, solid January schedule. All right, let's dive in. Tonight, 2 presentations. And Dr. Dan Butler is here, one of our talented social studies teachers. And with the board's blessing, he completed a sabbatical to finish his doctorate, which he has copies of here for everyone. If you haven't gotten it yet, here it is, big beefy sort of thing here. But I've been really excited and looking forward to this because he's dealing with a really interesting historical topic, comparing the American Civil Rights Movement with the Northern Irish Civil Rights Movement and examining different outcomes that occurred, and did quite a bit of traveling to Ireland and spoke to some really interesting people to fill in his understanding to be able to write his thesis here. So I am grateful not only to be working with folks like Dr. Dan, who have this kind of talent and drive to improve their craft and their knowledge in their department areas, but also grateful to be working with a board that recognizes the value of such projects as this. Sabbaticals are not a universal thing or an altogether common thing across the state. And so it's an enormous opportunity for our staff. So Dr. Dan Butler, take it away.
Good evening, everybody, members of the board. Dr. Moore. I started this, I was supposed to be here last March to talk right after I got back from the sabbatical and address the board and the members of the community about the trip. And unfortunately, I was supposed to present in March, and we were closed, I think, that Monday. I'm glad it was postponed to now because I just defended the dissertation that you have in front of you back on November 19th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon via Zoom. The sabbatical enabled me to go to Northern Ireland, and in Northern Ireland, I set up, basically before I left, I had met with people who set me up with people that I could interview when I got there. Just this past week, I was in on the AP seminar class or the AP research class and spoke to those students about what it is like to do research, all the process of doing research, having to go before the internal review board to get approval for who you're going to speak to, especially if you're using human participants. So I guess that's what I'm going to talk the most about because that was the most interesting part for me. And the interviews, you have, I think, 6 of the interviews that I did with former IRA members in the back of the dissertation. As my wife and my family have been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process. My daughter actually said to me when I walked up the stairs from work on Friday, after I defended on Thursday night, she told me I was finally happy again. My youngest son of 7 when I started the process is now going on 13, going on 14, and he actually said, I don't remember you any other way. So this was a 7.5-year process, and the time that I spent on it was incredibly valuable to my teaching, to my my additional providing for the community, providing for academia, and so on, to the point that a former supervisor has already told me, now that the dissertation is done, he wants me to have the actual interviews and the comparison study published, and he's willing to work with me, because no matter how long ago he retired, he'll always be my boss, because he doesn't stop. So the interviews that I did when I was in Northern Ireland, as I said, they were former IRA members, and one of the best interviews I had was as a result of my wife's contact with her roommate from college, who said, when you go to Northern Ireland, you have to look up my cousin. He had something to do with the Troubles. Well, in my mind, I'm thinking in my head, well, something to do with the Troubles means anybody living in Northern Ireland at that time had something to do with the Troubles. So I thought, well, this will be good, because you never turn down a contact, you never turn down any lead that you have, especially when you're doing research. So I look him up on Facebook, because that seems to be the way I did a lot of contacts. And when I go to meet him, I see the picture of him, and he's got to be near 75, 76 years old. Now, when I have a friend of mine who says I have a cousin, I expect him to be at least similar to my age. I'm not 75, I'm not even 10 years, 15, 20 years in there. So when I go to meet him, I get in the car with him, and I'm driving with him, and he turns to me, and I said, well, Laura told me you had something to do with the Troubles, and he kind of chuckled to himself, and he said, something to do with the Troubles. He said, I was the head of the IRA in Armagh County, which is referred to as the Bandit Lands, because the British government never got a hold of that area. And he was the reason that they never got a hold for the 10 years that he was in charge. So he proceeded to take me on a one-on-one tour around the area, told me things that I would have never been able to find in a book. And as we were getting out into an area, I'll never, ever forget this. We're getting out into an area in downtown as he was going to buy me dinner. And he pointed to where the British headquarters was off to the left of where we were getting out of the car. And we're getting out of the car, and he starts to walk in the opposite direction of where the restaurant was. And then he proceeds to say, I was standing right about here with a rocket launcher. And I'm like dumbfounded. I don't know how to respond to this. I don't know how to react. And the focus of my dissertation was basically why the civil rights movement in the United States remained peaceful, as in guided by the nonviolence of Martin Luther King Jr. and basically following after Gandhi. In Northern Ireland, they tried to do the same thing, but it didn't work out that way. So my focus was, why did Northern Ireland go violent? Why did it turn into a paramilitary campaign? And one of the things I found most interesting when I was talking to, especially this man in particular, I said, what was it? Was there a breaking point? Was there something that you just realized that forced you to understand that this wasn't going to work in a peaceful manner? And he said, I went to school at 9 years old, and at 9 years old, they told me the British didn't belong here. And from that point on, that was it. And so as I did more and more research, I found that it was the culture in Northern Ireland that existed that played as much of a role as the government agencies. So the culture of the Irish, and even the Northern Irish Catholics for that matter, was a culture that they grew up in the violence. I mean, in the interviews on the end of in that, you read stories of kids at 11 and 12 years old that are making Molotov cocktails, and they're organizing raids on British military forces. It's something that they grew up in. So it was just fascinating for me to be able to go there and to meet with these guys. I mean, I went down to the Prisoner Counseling Center, the former IRA Prison Counseling Center, and I met a guy who basically introduced me and got me 17 interviews. That is over 22 hours of information that I could use for this. And in those interviews, everything was structured around how they grew up, the situation they grew up in, poverty. You know, they dealt with a lot of the same situation as African Americans did in the United States. Segregation in housing, segregation in employment. If the employer found out they lived in a certain area of Northern Ireland, they wouldn't be hired because it was just they were Catholic, so they didn't get hired. And that was basically the environment they grew up in, and they continued to live with that throughout their lives. So when I was meeting with them, walking through Derry, which it's funny, when the British came in and they took over Derry, they named it Londonderry. So when I was getting a tour by a group called the Bogside Tours, they said Londonderry is the only city in the world that has 6 letters that are silent in the beginning of Derry, which I thought was funny because that's not the way it is. But you have to be careful with who you talk to when you talk to them in Northern Ireland, because the idea of Bloody Sunday in 1972 is still there. Soldier F, one of the soldiers that was responsible for killing 4 of the 13 protesters on Bloody Sunday, is currently on trial. And if you are in the Unionist or Protestant areas in Northern Ireland, I saw a banner across the street that said support Soldier F. So this is still very ingrained in what they live with, and it's also one of those things that I could have never gotten that without going there. Coming back and seeing from that perspective what they dealt with and how they lived, and then meeting those guys. I mean, these guys were part of something called the blanket protest, where they basically refused to wear the clothing that was provided for them because they wanted to be treated as prisoners of war, because they saw it as a war. So what they did was they basically didn't wear any clothes. They were naked. And they were given a blanket to throw over them, and they lived in there naked with a blanket. So then they went a step further, and they said, if you want to use the bathroom, if you want to do anything, you have to put the uniform on before you walk out. So they refused to do that. So they ended up using the bathroom, I forget what it's called. It was like a bucket that they used to go to the bathroom in the room. And the devotion and the sheer power of their conviction is mind-blowing to an American who's grown up being able to vote and being able to do everything that we do in a democracy. I mean, they went, the hunger strikes, all of it, and meeting family members of those who died during the hunger strikes. It was, I don't know how I could do the same thing had I not been able to go there. I mean, my dissertation is 167 pages, and I am invested in it. And I hope in the coming months I will be using Northern Ireland, what I learned in Northern Ireland, to teach in my global studies class as a way of going back and forth with human rights and human rights violations. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Yes.
What are the parallels between civil rights
the biggest parallels were they were fighting for very similar actions, or very similar against discrimination. I mean, in Northern Ireland, a lot of the housing was controlled by the government, and the government provided housing. So the most famous story about it is there was a family of 5 who were squatting in a home, and it was a Catholic family. They'd been on the waiting list for 4 years. There was a Protestant girl who graduated college at 19. She was given the house, and the Catholic family was forced out. So the parallels and discrimination was one man, one vote. In Northern Ireland, the more property you own, the more you could vote. If you owned a business, you could vote 2 or 3 times. So that's not in the parallels in the United States, where they were being prevented from voting.
The disparity in a violent movement to protect rights and their conviction, is there any factor of race that plays into that? Why the two are different, do you think?
Well, and that was, for me, one of the reasons that the thing that stuck out for me with Northern Ireland was, in sociology, I always learned that race was a social construct. So the idea now that you're taking Protestants and Catholics and saying one is a different race than the other, when to us, we go to school, we go to work, we work with whether we don't know, 9 times out of 10 don't know the religion of the person that we're with. So when I can take that and I can use that as an example to show my students that race is a social construct, because they basically did that with, people who were born and raised in Ireland, had the same skin color and everything else. And now we're coming to the United States, where you're showing race as a social construct because African Americans are biologically the same, all minorities are biologically the same as whites. And it's a complete, and that's something I've been using a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Thank
And
you very much.
for the copies of the dissertation. It's just fascinating work, and I appreciate all that you've done, and am just impressed. So fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Dan Butler. So we have now Mr. Robert Cole is here tonight, and this is the conclusion of my report for you all, with thanks for your attention. Mr. Robert Cole is here tonight to present on work in our Math Department. The Student Life and Program Committee spent some time earlier this week discussing what they'd like to hear from him. I've also been sharing some data with all of you over the past several months about various disproportionalities and gaps in all of our programs and also math. Mr. Cole has been an insightful and dedicated contributor to those conversations with Ms. Cangelosi. Hey, Mr. Brandt's been in on several of those conversations as well. And I got to say, the teachers in the math department have done a simply incredible job, and I even think a spellbinding job keeping our students on track and engaged through the past 20 months. So, Mr. Cole, I will turn it over to you. Are you having a little... There you go. Excellent. All right. Mr. Cole, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. Hello, and thank you in advance for your time tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to present the HC Math Department to you. And by way of introduction, my name is Bob Cole. I've been a member of the faculty since 2003. In July 2019, I was appointed as acting math supervisor and subsequently hired as supervisor in July of 2020. It's been my professional privilege to lead the department through rather extraordinary times, but I am driven by a deep passion and commitment to Hunterdon Central. I'm a proud parent of two fairly recent HC graduates, and like Mr. Panico, I'm also an alum. So tonight, I'm hoping to provide a chance to get to know us, a little bit about our curriculum, a review of our available data dashboards and our approach to using them, along with a quick tour of some ways we can support our students and provide intervention. The math department, by the numbers, is a department of 29 dedicated full-time faculty. There are 9 experienced in-class support teachers, 2 talented long-term sub and or leave replacement teachers, and knowledgeable daily substitutes providing consistent and conscientious coverage at a moment's notice. This is a people-based profession, and organizational capacity is an important consideration for every school. Our department has a nice balance of traditional teacher preparation versus alternate route candidates entering the classroom with various STEM-related work experiences. You'll hear and see more on this later, but as we build out our dual enrollment course offerings, specific advanced degrees are required. And at this point, we have 3 qualified teachers to offer dual credit in our computer science courses, and 3 teachers who are approved for dual credit in mathematics. Another important highlight as we look for role models is within our computer science teachers, we have 3 female teachers and 1 male teacher, and that trend continues into our math classrooms as well. In terms of hiring, we've been very lucky. We look to hire excellent candidates despite candidate pools being markedly smaller in recent hiring cycles. I wanted to give an overview of our student enrollment. So in terms of our department, we're responsible for almost 2,700 student enrollments. In every one of these enrollments, 2,691 to be specific, matters to our math team. We are working hard, harder than ever, to create positive learning outcomes and successful learning outcomes, positive learning experiences and successful learning outcomes for these students. The pie chart on the left shows that we're quite balanced across year of graduation. Despite differences in class sizes, we still find balance and break out pretty evenly. I think the junior class might have a slight bulge there due to the popularity of our SAT prep course, which is usually taken in the 11th grade. The chart on the right begins to split out our enrollment by subject area, and at the top of the chart, I'd like you to note the computer science courses and our SAT prep courses. They are 6% and 5% of our overall enrollment, and that translates to 165 students taking a computer science course. We do hope that this continues to grow, and we're intentional about looking to grow that, and also 116 students enrolled in SAT. The pie chart also includes some summer course enrollments that have already taken place, but we're glad to have summer school back in session. 57% of the enrollments I will refer to as our core coursework. That's grabbing Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 and kind of pulling that together and considering that core. Pre-calculus and calculus make up another quarter. And then the 17% from the other elective coursework, some of which I've mentioned, computer science, the SAT prep. And the other includes two specific courses, number systems and discrete math. These are important courses usually taken in 12th grade. I'll talk more about these courses just a little later. What is also represented and embedded in this chart is 28 courses, 140 plus different sections or classes, 4 different program levels, students with various career aspirations, competencies, and passions, and students of various races, ethnicities, and backgrounds. And we are very intentional about monitoring our various subgroups and look to be responsive to any disproportionality we find. By the numbers, the table on the left supports the chart on the right, and I'm continuing to slice our course enrollment. You can see the general progression taking shape from left to right in terms of pathways, Algebra 1, Algebra or Geometry, Algebra 2, pre-calculus. In the table, a dash is representing a population less than 10 students, but a 0 is indeed a 0. I really wanted this to offer you an overview and a lens into which students are taking what courses. It's important that we find our students where they are. Looking at the red in the graph, there's roughly twice as many freshmen taking Algebra 1 versus Algebra 2. Looking at the brown, it doesn't look brown on the TV, but next, clearly most geometry students are in 10th grade, and if you look to the geometry on the horizontal axis, you'll see our 10th grade students there in brown. You're looking at green and blue, there are equal numbers of 11th and 12th graders accessing pre-calculus. SAT prep is almost always taken in junior year. I mentioned that, no surprise there, on our way to college. And statistics is usually taken in the senior year. Something I'm particularly proud to point out is that our computer science has good representation across all grade levels. It's quite well balanced and intentionally so. We try to allow our computer science to be accessible by all and intentionally accessible throughout a student's 4-year plan. Our expanded curriculum offers many pathways. It meets and exceeds state requirements, adheres to state standards, it's anchored in state code, and we really want this to be a launching pad to great things. We'd like to ensure that it's accessible. We'd like to accommodate acceleration, allow for math growth spurts. We'd like to be flexible and get students in the right place, which mostly means math at the right pace. And we want to build continuity that allows students to successfully scaffold their knowledge along the way. We'd like our students to be successfully challenged by this curriculum with rigor without feeling overwhelmed or burdened, making concepts available but staying within the locus of control, offering many flexible pathways. Here's a curriculum progression a little bit siloed. Student progress would go left to right, and in the next pair of slides, I'm trying to slice it, the curriculum by both course and then by grade. With the caveat that students start in different places, I'd like to highlight the various program levels that we offer. As you move down a column, the breadth and depth of coverage are increasing. This translates into pacing and complexity of problem solving. The core coursework is in bold, so I've tried to indicate that for you as well. So, for example, a student in 304 is learning prerequisite skills but not quite entered into the core, and students who move beyond Algebra 2 are no longer in a tested subject area. They're outside of the core. These courses are still important for competitive college admission. The yellow highlights indicates where students could complete coursework for college credit. And I'm pleased to show that number systems, a course that I mentioned before but I'm returning back to, is a course that you can take. I've put it in the pre-calculus bucket. It's not quite technically, but equivalent to. And that's a course that allows a student to earn dual credit at RVCC. Recent this year is a chance for pre-calculus students to earn dual credit with our partner. And you'll notice that AP Computer Science Principles, I apologize for the condensed abbreviation, CSP, Computer Science Principles, and followed by Computer Science, AP Computer Science, have similar designations. And AP in general can be recognized by colleges with sufficient score on the AP test. And so you'll notice in the calculus column as well and the statistics column. The data science coursework is generally available after Algebra 1, as mentioned. A second view is by grade, and here you'll see our grade levels and some supporting percentages. Again, I'm giving a flavor of who is where. And if you'll look at our 9th grade enrollments, there are 585 students in 9th grade. The next column, 670 in 10th grade, 768 in our junior year. That's our highest. And then an exact match in 12th grade, back to the 670 mark that was there in 10th grade. Our core courses that lay the foundations start to diminish. First at 82%. Again, I'm just bundling the red ink. 82%, 72% as you move across the page. 50% of our juniors still working on core, and 14% of our seniors. You'll also notice that calculus, 30% of our senior class is enrolled in a calculus course. If you'll go back to 11th grade, there are almost 9% involved in calculus and 1% in statistics. And there's that even balance of computer science in the purple below with the SAT at 14% for our junior class as well. In terms of our department, we believe a team approach is a successful approach, and along the left, we work in PLCs, strategically, PLCs, professional learning communities. We generally organize by math coursework, occasionally other representations as well. For example, our computer science teachers met recently outside of their math to develop a plan for Computer Science Week just recently and Hour of Code. Teams are important to us. They allow us to plan. They allow us to monitor pacing and calibrate. And we're beginning to examine data together as well. Teams are also important to look at new policies, develop expertise, provide feedback, and find out what is working best. And in terms of some of our successes, we've mitigated failure with credit completion. throughout the summer, actually 2 summers. We've supported struggling learners in the spring with after-school virtual tutorials known as STARS tutorials. This summer in August, we were particularly excited to roll out Ignite review sessions that occurred on Tuesday and Thursday nights virtually, available to students, and again, remote review sessions throughout August that were getting students ready for the school year. And as we become more data rich, we expect to use data to inform decisions. Also excited to return to our Summer Institute and in-person learning with our Summer Academy, where we were able to provide credit for students who may have struggled and or accelerate with us as well. Our 2021 priorities are to get back to in-person learning, forming those relationships that we know are so vital to powerful learning. We're excited to be able to offer assessment in controlled environments as well. We want to nurture, we believe a math mindset is a growth mindset. This is something we want to cultivate, and we want to move students from, I'll never be able to do this to I can do this, or I hate making mistakes to mistakes help me learn, and I'm either good at it or I'm not, to I'm not good at it just quite yet, but I'll get there. In terms of our use of data, I feel like there's so much data and so little time. We have been training in IXL and Linkit. You'll hear more about those data dashboards shortly. But we are also looking forward to time to interact with that data and time to consider the questions to ask of the data. These dashboards are relatively new to us, but we hope to explore support and remediation. We hope to explore acceleration pathways, and we hope to explore disproportionality. The data has the potential of being multidimensional. We're hopeful to find our best indicators that either correlate and ideally become predictive in terms of student success. We are implementing grading practices, acknowledging the power of a double feedback loop and a chance for a student to revisit work and demonstrate proficiency that may have not been demonstrated in a particular time frame. We're also trying to be flexibility. Flexibility has been the name of the game for us in education for the last year and a half, and we know that balance is so important, and as well as student wellness. If you were visiting our classrooms this year, you would notice more intention to brain breaks, more intention to guided practice. I do, we do, you do. More intentional about student reflection as well, allocating time to complete this in class, using prompts to focus on students on their own learning behaviors that support deeper learning. What did you do today? What did you learn looking back on the unit, etc.? That reflection piece that's so important to teaching and learning. We are also looking to expand our dual credit, potentially into calculus and other math classrooms. I feel like I'm always on the phone with Ms. Cangelosi-Hyde and the RBC coordinator in our efforts to expand dual credit and opportunities for Hunterdon Central students. Sitting in a high school classroom and earning college credit is a very, very exciting proposition. And we're also looking to expand computer science. Last year, we introduced a new course called Internet of Things. And this year, we have our eyes set on cybersecurity. Not quite there yet, but hoping to get there soon. The next part of the presentation is going to focus on our data dashboards, of which there are 3. We use these dashboards hoping to incorporate data and monitor and measure disproportionality. The first up is Start Strong, and I know that you've seen some of this reported, but I'm breaking this out across math levels in this case. This slide accounts for 330 Algebra 1 students. I'm back to my shorthand, and I apologize for that. 312 is STEM, so red would be STEM level, brown would be CP level, and the green would be our academic level. And what I want you to notice, and this doesn't look great off the top, I do want to continue to talk through it, is that this suggests particularly a lens on our ninth graders. And so, it suggests that strong support, and I apologize for the color not appearing on the monitor as with as much contrast as I would prefer. And strong support, I want to pull your attention to in our Algebra 2 CP, that's the light blue on the screen, and ninth grade, that marker, the largest, would be about 100 students there. Correlating against course averages this fall, we don't see that this is the terrible news, and I will talk more about the merits of Start Strong. Looking at geometry, red would be our honors. There are 4 levels there. The honors is red. That wasn't available on the Algebra 1 screen, but then followed by STEM. 323 is known as CP, and 324 would be our academic level. And what you'll notice in geometry is a marked increase where we're looking at strong support may be needed. I need to emphasize that. And with our CP numbers in that bucket is about 65. If I take the STEM and the CP and strong support, that's about 76 students. The learning standards for geometry went back to 8th grade. The Start Strong did not. There's not really a correlation between Algebra 1 and geometry, so that's why the Start Strong falls back to the grade 8 standards that are pertaining to geometry rather than Algebra 1. The next slide presents you with Start Strong data for Algebra 2, again by level. Here you'll see ninth graders that were taking honors Algebra 2 or Algebra 2 STEM, maybe needing less support, and then the strong support category would be CP, and this again is better news in that Algebra 2 STEM and Algebra 2 CP has about 44 students that are indicating that strong support may be necessary. I've left academic off of that list for a reason. In conclusion, I think that we should be considering using Start Strong as a traffic light. Its greatest value, I believe, is as a watch list. We are not noticing that the numbers that are associated with possibly needing strong support are turning out into course failure through the fall. We're monitoring carefully, and we'll use Start Strong along with other indicators to continue to look for intervention strategies. Start Strong is not particularly useful in identifying skills gaps. It's not particularly actionable or operational in that regard. It does not lead to specific targets by standard, skill, or topic. It does inform support and intervention at a most general level, and it has certainly confirmed the need for universal supports, what we refer to as Tier 1 RTI. These supports include guided practice, supporting productive struggle, modeling, visual representation, manipulations, and collecting evidence of student learning. I'm going to move on to a second dashboard. That's Linkit. Linkit provides us with an awful lot of data. That's what it looks like on the left for real. I've accumulated, and now this time, this is not quantity information, this is now percentages. And these percentages are similar to how the NJSLA gets reported, where you'll notice that we have two large categories, primarily with data in either partially meeting or approaching. This was administered in fall of 2021. The math department was the first to test. And you'll notice that Algebra 1 has a low sample size. I'm going to go to the next screen because I do break out that table into visual representation. The yellow on that screen is partially meeting, and the lighter yellow is approaching. Algebra 1 has a low representation because our ninth graders were exempted from Form A due to their participation in the PSAT 9. We do intend for them to take Form B, and I will talk more about Form A, B, and C, particularly together. The algebra students that you're seeing in this report are mostly 10th graders taking Algebra 1, and these are reports. My apologies, I lost my place. Unlike the Start Strong, we are starting to get some directionals from Linkit Form A. And what I'd like you to notice is for algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, I've indicated the number of test takers as well as some of the areas where where it suggests that we might need to look for support. Linkit does break down standards into topics and skill levels, and we're able to drill down to see that. One of the standards is seeing structure in expressions, and as for an example, that breaks into the topics of reasoning with equations and inequalities, interpreting categorical and quantitative data, and arithmetic with polynomials and rational expressions. The approach to assessment data, and so some weaknesses. If I were to describe Algebra 1, we're looking at solving quadratics, inequalities, systems of equations, polynomial operations. In geometry, the use of trigonometric ratios, similarity, right triangles, and then proving theorems about triangles. And lastly, in Algebra 2, factoring polynomials using data from sample survey and probability. Now, the thing about Linkit and its approach to offering the Form A, Form B, and Form C is that our curriculum has not quite caught up to it. So Form A is going to be very useful in establishing a baseline for us so that we can look back in a rearview mirror. And I am expecting that the partial and approaching will move as the curriculum comes to our students. Form B is not a test that differs from Form A and is given in the mid-year, and then another slice towards the end of the year. I have a marker that will show you that information as well. Linkit's a very powerful data dashboard. It is accessible by many stakeholders. It allows us to drill down by class, by student. It provides an item analysis and also a grouping feature that allows us to that automatically helps us with finding students that would be in a similar group, and that will help us with differentiation. I can see teachers' data, teachers can see student data, and I believe that there's some promise in here. On this page, one of the key aspects of data and any data dashboard is its ability to handle multiple sources, and so I just threw some red arrows on there. That wouldn't be part of the screenshot, and what you can see is that there's a chance to see both in the same panel a geometry Linkit and then also the geometry Start Strong. So now we have multiple markers that might start to indicate action that might be helpful in terms of looking at supports and interventions. In the future, I do think that it might be that we'll move towards common assessments appearing within Linkit as well, and not just relying on Form A, B, and C. Our own assessments and benchmarks would be curriculum specific and may be helpful for us diagnosing problems immediately, as opposed to, for instance, the statistics unit that did not score well in Algebra 2. They are spring units. So, I would be expecting to see improvement there as we move through them in the spring, where they would be first seen in Form C. Another dashboard that I'd like to talk about as well, and I believe it has a powerful promise for us, is IXL. IXL is quite popular, piloted in the spring of 2021. Who pilots new technology in the middle of COVID disruption? We do. Several full department trainings were taking place in the spring of 2021. We purchased this program, and we were recently trained in November. Upcoming training again in February. But it does support students with learning plans and allows us to extend learning. To date, we've answered about 100,000 questions, and we're continuing to learn how best to apply and use this tool, in addition to the skill plans that can be created by the teacher for the student. It also offers diagnostic and analysis as well. And it's the kind of program that gets calibrated where difficulty level starts to increase. If a student gets a problem right, the next problem that's presented to them has an algorithm associated with it, and they develop a SMART score over time. And we are hoping to dig in and look at those diagnostic and analytic tools as well. Now, there's a lot of dashboards that we've talked about. And this is a graphic that I'm particularly proud of that kind of marks our dashboards over time. You see in September, that's where we took the New Jersey Start Strong, and that's a one and done. It's a rather unique test. It does not have any longitudinal data associated with it. I'm not sure it will be given again. Whereas if you'll look down the page, and in keeping with New Jersey metrics, there's a row for NJ GPA, a graduation proficiency assessment, and also the NJ SLA. At this point, we believe both of those tests will be with us in early spring, March, and then into spring. And so I'm imagining that they will produce the data that New Jersey Start Strong was in the fall, but with the added benefit of some more drilling down and getting useful data, and not just the traffic light, green, less, some, or strong support in terms of metrics. Linkit will be offered, as I mentioned, with Form A, B, and C at various times throughout the year. The test remains the same. Our curriculum evolves. As students see more of the curriculum, we're expecting that those rows, those columns that would move from partial or approaching to move us into bubble, meeting, and exceeding. The PSAT is new to us. I'm really looking forward to what that has to offer. Recently in a meeting, I saw some of the math components that can be pulled out, and I am hoping to dive into that a little bit more. There might be some promise in there for our students, and particularly longitudinal over time. We're very interested in finding assessments that allow us to identify and predict success for a student and move them forward in their math learning. Course specific has a few more metrics to it, and this would be our assessments. The larger blue triangles on that row would represent a final midterm exam or a final exam that's pinned to the curriculum. And of course, IXL, again, has the promise of kind of fitting in and filling in gaps where needed, and also being used as metrics. I let that extend past June because we are hoping that we can assign summer work. Students can log in with their Google single sign-on and continue to be working and practicing their skills throughout the summer so that there's readiness for the fall. And I think there's work to do in terms of us identifying and pointing students towards those skills, coupled with maybe our continuing the Ignite program, which I believe was successful as well. I'm going to move to support in interventions now. Done with data dashboards, and I'd just like to highlight 3 items. First, our math lab. Our math lab takes place now in this beautiful building, our renovated IMC. It's basically walk-up math help, linked to study halls or study skills classes. It's also available to an early in or out student should they want to stay with us and get math help before they head on out. It's staffed by a teacher that all of our classroom teachers, highly qualified and certified staff, and it's not restricted to just our core courses. So it's really a chance to get math help. This is where we'd offer homework help, maybe review concepts ahead of a test or a quiz. Sometimes a classroom teacher will know that a test wasn't taken, so we'll use it to as a way to efficiently develop our makeup work as well, and it may indeed be used to support our portfolio appeals process, and I'd like to recognize the teachers are doing that. There are 8 blocks, 6 of which are covered. That's Miss Mulvihill, Mrs. Ward, Mr. Kusick, Ms. Kraus, Mrs. Singh, and Mr. Kufel. All outstanding teachers, all highly diverse in terms of the different subjects that a student would be able to show up to and get help with. That's here. And we are kind of floating right now. We haven't found our exact spot. We used to have a sign, math lab, but now it's a check-in at the front desk, and teacher will be available. The second intervention, a more powerful intentional intervention, is something called response to intervention. This is commonly known as a multi-tier support system, an MTSS. And this is where we offer push in and pull out help. I did mention Tier 1 before as universal supports. And so as the triangle might indicate there, that's from the state of New Jersey, about 80 or 85% of our students will be in Tier 1, which just means that they're in a classroom with a good teacher, great teacher, and those supports are universal to all the learners in that. Where we see a student that's struggling, perhaps through Start Strong, or perhaps through grade performance, or perhaps a teacher recommending, we would push in another highly qualified teacher into that classroom and or pull students out. This is a fluid program, so if you're identified as a Tier 2 student and recommended for that level of support, it doesn't mean you stay with that support for the rest of the year. Tier 2 can move to Tier 3. That would be increasing the intervention and the intensity of the intervention, either by meetings, meeting more frequently, or for longer duration. This does only apply to our core coursework, and the math department and counseling will use this strategically for our struggling learners. What we look for there is a student with maybe low academic performance, underachievement, but also kind of high student effort. And so the teachers that are involved there, again, 6 of them, Mrs. Singh, Mr. Cole, there's some repeats there, right? Mrs. Schiff, Mrs. Terlinden, who also serves as our RTI coordinator, Mr. Kusick, and Mrs. Bejak as well. The flex block, what we've been doing is having a teacher kind of wrap around where they have another prep. They're able to move to that location and serve the students who may need the help in, say, Block 1A on one day versus Block 4A. I believe it's Mrs. Schiff, or no, it's Mrs. Singh that does that. So 1A and 2A are kind of a shift together. We'll take care of the scheduling, but a very important intervention as well, RTI. And then finally, oh yes, and about 50 students currently identified in RTI, and some moving from credit completion. So those students who were potentially at risk and struggled through the summer struggled to complete on time in June and extended into the summer. They immediately went on an RTI list this year. RTI started almost immediately in September, whereas in other years it takes us a while to identify. So I'm particularly proud of that. And then lastly, a very unique opportunity for both the person receiving the tutoring, but also the person giving the tutoring as well, is our peer tutoring process. An email to mathtutor@hcrhs.org puts the ball in motion. We're receiving about 10 inquiries per week from student or parent. It's a list that gets monitored daily. And what we'll also do this year is solicit feedback at various intervals and communicate back to the classroom teacher as well. This is all taking place through our Math Honor Society, Mu Alpha Theta. And kudos to the advisor. I'm thinking first name. Miss Koval, thank you very much, Mr. Brandt. And a testament to the power of mentorship. I've told an anecdotal story where I watched a first matchup happen between older student and younger student. I don't know the subject area, and just even negotiating the schedule and deciding how, when the availability was already a positive experience in terms of the social interaction between those two students, not to mention leveraging then the academic supports that might be available as well. I'll end with just 2 metrics for peer tutoring. The first shows our peer tutoring program. There are currently 65 students enrolled there by course. This is a slice by course. Some students are peer tutored in multiple subjects, so the numbers on these 2 slides don't quite match up. But you'll notice geometry is where we have our most assignments currently, followed by Algebra 2 and Algebra 1. We do offer peer tutoring to our pre-calculus and calculus students as well. And then last slide, another slice of peer tutoring, this time by academic level, and you'll notice that CP is well represented there. That's important to me because CP was where we had some larger, taller lines on our graphs as well. So I suspect that there's some help that's being offered through this program as well. At this point, this concludes my presentation. I'm very proud of the math department and the hard work of the members of the department. And I know that I'm confident in our capacity to deliver successful outcomes, learning outcomes, and I know that we'll get better in our use of data over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Thank you.
All right.
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
If you have a question.
Thank you very much. It was very comprehensive. My question pertains to the 9th grade algebra. You said that Start Strong indicated there were 100 students in need of strong support, but we did not do any Linkit Benchmark A testing in lieu of PSAT ninth grade. Is that correct?
That is correct. We were being sensitive to the amount of testing we were asking students to take at that particular point of time. It was just late September, so this was all brand new, and so we did excuse students from the Linkit test. We will return them into the Linkit with Form B and Form C. So we will have data that becomes actionable for us over time. We just have to wait a little bit, and we don't have the September marker for them. We'll have a February and June marker.
Well, my concern is what the other data are we using to validate the Start Strong for our most needy students, which are the Algebra 1 ninth graders?
Currently, that is our in-class course-specific curriculum assessments and grades, and also the formative assessment that we're seeing with teachers. Teachers, as they're seeing a struggling learner, can recommend to RTI, and this is a particular area where I believe more work is required in identifying students for RTI. So that will be a next task as well.
I'm still concerned that is that number 100 valid? What's your sense? I mean, we don't have any common am I right? Think there's no common sense assessment for Linkit for our ninth grade algebra as yet?
In 313, our teachers are administering tests that are very, very closely aligned. I can't say they're completely common, but I can say that they're, say, 90%, and it's those grades that we have been monitoring as well.
And again, do they verify that 100 students are in need of strong support?
No, that is
So
true. In
that's-
fact, the evidence is suggesting that we don't have, if strong support would be indicating more failure, more D's and F's, we are not seeing that at this time in that particular class.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much. That was so comprehensive and really, really helpful to hear. Really exciting to hear about. It sounds so student-centric. I really love that you're talking about the flexibility and opportunities to revisit work. Just this approach of empowering students and less of a, aha, here's the weakness or here's the problem. This is really encouraging. Would it be fair to say that these metrics and these measurements have an opportunity to be used not only for intervention, but to identify students that may have been unfairly or mistakenly categorized in certain math placement in lower grades that show up here and have abilities that haven't really been tapped into or identified? Is this something that could...
Most definitely. We're very
Wonderful.
interested in what the data can say, particularly with the PSAT 9. We think there's promise there in terms of its predicting success at a next level. We haven't quite correlated yet, but where acceleration is possible, we are very, very interested and try to be as flexible as possible with placement. And that hasn't always been the case, and so I do appreciate you recognizing that as something that's important to students, especially as they learn and grow and develop. Over time, the brain forms, the mathematical thinking becomes something that increases, confidence blossoms, and the next thing you know, we have a young mathematician on our hands that's, wants to reach for more, and we want to encourage that and celebrate that across our curriculum for sure.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, we were just having conversations this morning with Mr. Cole and Mrs. Cangelosi-Hade and Mr. Brandt about the opportunities to bring PSAT. There are forms of the PSAT for 8th grade, and can we use that to identify students for opportunity? And the PSAT has a lot of analytical tools behind it to identify for opportunity rather than just as a gatekeeping measure, or as an intervention measure. So it's funny, we were just talking about that this morning in a good long discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. This
Yeah.
does not end at the math department. This extends all the way to the superintendent's office, and we continually interested in available tools to help us really know who is where in support of their learning.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, thank you so much for a very comprehensive report on the math department. I appreciate all your work and your staff's work there on all of this. It's an interesting time to be working in a cumulative kind of topic like math. So that concludes my report. We do have a HIB motion there to affirm.
Yep, got it.
And
I've got the note right here. Can I have a motion to affirm HIB HC 21, 22, 10, and 11, please?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion happened in the executive session last time, so can I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Charney?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Nichol?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell? I have a question. Was this HIB in executive session in the last two meetings?
the
Just
last
the last one.
Okay,
meeting.
Thank you. Abstain. And Mr. Panicum?
Yes.
Oh, yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Now's the time on the agenda for residents forum. These are for any items that are on the agenda. So if you have a comment on one of the agenda items that's under one of the org items or the committees, feel free to come up to the podium and speak. Make sure you sign in and state your name. It'll be a maximum of 30 minutes, and everybody will be asked to speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Or 3. It's just the agenda. There'll be another open one in about 5 minutes. Seeing none, I'm gonna move on. There is a item on the agenda under the organizational items for a policy. So make sure you guys have looked at that policy because we will be voting on that next week. Can I have an update from the Student Life and Program Committee, please?
Yes. Policy was looked at, and we recommend that it be put on the next agenda for final approval. For second reading, does this, do you want a motion on this at all? Because I believe you're looking for approval for the next meeting, which is the official board meeting.
I think we're looking for motions on G1 and G2. Is that not correct?
G1 and G2 are the only movement.
Yep, just
Yeah.
G1 and G2.
So, no, we have, the committee has two items. If you're asking for the committee report now?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have two items that we will wish to move, which will be items 1, tuition and transportation. There's been a change in the school that one of our students has been going to in terms of special ed. And item 2 has to do, which is interesting, it's an overnight field trip. It's the wrestling team. The wrestling team wants to go to a meet called the Beast of the East. And the Beast of the East takes place at the University of Delaware. We're very proud of our wrestling team, and the reason we need to move it tonight is that it's happening December 17th and 19th, which is next week, so we can't wait to the formal meeting. We will move this as soon as we get through the rest of the items. We'll come back and move these two items. The rest of the items for SL&P, we have a new contract for transportation and education for another student. special ed, we have a policy reading on the sexual harassment of students. It's a second reading, and again, that would be moved the next meeting because we will move that officially at the official board meeting next week. This is an update, by the way, of existing policy. It's not a brand-new policy. It's a policy that's been in effect, and it now has to be revised according to the state. One student, his next item is a student has applied for early graduation, and she meets the requirements, and we want to approve that next meeting. We discussed that. We also discussed a couple of more trips that are coming forth for our competitive groups. The first one is going to be an overnight field trip for the cheerleaders to Orlando, Florida. But that will happen February 9th to February 14th. We have 50 students, parents, and coaches all going down there. You know that we've had very successful outings of our cheerleading group. They are up there. They win a lot of meets, and we want to approve that to happen. But we don't need to give them formal approval tonight. We can wait till a week from tonight, where the formal meeting is, the official meeting, and we also have the same occurrence for the dance team to also go to Orlando. They are appearing the week before the cheerleaders, a similar situation, 21 students, chaperones, and parents, the week of February 2nd to February 7th. So we would approve that next week as well. We've looked at all the forms, the sanitation, the COVID protections are extreme, and we think they'll be very well protected. If anybody comes up with a problem, they will have to return home with their parent, but we're looking forward to their having a successful meet. And finally, the last item, we like to report happily that we have a new club. There's been established a request for a poetry club, which will be run by or advised by Penny Wintermute. A number of students have applied to take it, and it is under the advisement. It's part of the National English Honor Society, and they sponsor it and guide it, and we run under their guidelines, and I think that'll be exciting for students that are interested. So those are the items for the Student Life and Program Committee, and so I would like to make a motion to approve items 1 and 2 for tonight.
Thanks, Bruce. I've got a motion for G1 and G2. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Motion and a second. Can I have a roll call vote? Oh, sorry, any discussion?
We do have, actually, there is an amendment to make on number 2, so we need to move it as amended, where it says 3,100 on the cost
Oh,
of
yeah, it's
the
been increased.
lodging. It's actually 3441 will be the cost
Does that
of the rooms.
Change the total.
It does change the total by about $341, yes.
Okay.
This only happens because I think it was a matter of getting the tax in there.
Yeah.
Got it. So, Bruce, can you please remove that G1 and G2 as amended, please?
Yes, okay. I need a motion for item 1 and item 2 as amended.
Thank you. I have a motion for item 1 and 2 as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
Now, any discussion? Hearing none. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Charney?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Nichol?
Yes.
Sorry. Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
And Mr. Panico?
Yes.
All yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Can I have an update from the O&T committee, please?
I have a brief Operations and Transportation Committee review tonight. The first thing we're looking to do is appoint our BA, Heather Spitzer, as Fund Commissioner to the School's Health Insurance Fund to represent Hunterdon Central effective September 1st, 2021, and also our Assistant BA, Karen Bishop Johnson, as alternate Fund Commissioner. We have our standard financial reports, invoices, and transfers, and we do have some surplus property, a couple of wrestling mats that that have no value, we're looking to get rid of and donate them to the Old Dog Boxing Club. Are we taking action on one?
We are taking action on G1,
On-
H1.
One, yeah, H1.
Just H1, okay. I'd like to move item H1.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Charney?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Nichol?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
And Mr. Panico?
Yes.
Oh, yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Can I have an update from the Personnel Committee, please?
Yes, thank you, Vinnie. Personnel Committee met on December 8th virtually. We have 5 items to move on the agenda tonight. The first is retirement. The second is 2 resignations. We have 2 contractual appointments. We have some per diem appointments and some hourly appointments, many of which have started already or will be starting soon, so we're going to move those tonight. The rest of the personnel section of the agenda, I-6 through I-20, is for informational purposes only tonight. We'll move at our next meeting on December 20th. Most are our regular monthly business. Schedule C&D appointments, some curriculum and instruction, professional development. I would like to point out I-14 through 18, which Dr. Moore referenced in his report, which are the committees that are going to be staffed to support board and district goals, which are funded by some federal ARP and ESSER 3 grants. And then just to end those informational items, we have a settlement agreement and some date revisions for next week. So with that, I would like to move I-1 through I-5 tonight.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Charney?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Nichol?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
And Mr. Panico?
Yes.
Oh, yes, motion carries.
Thank you. I'm going to move the residents forum up in front of additional business and board comments. So now is the time on the agenda for residents to come speak for any items that are on or off the agenda. If you wish to speak, please step up to the podium, sign in, state your name, so you can speak for a maximum of 3 minutes, not 5. I read that incorrectly. And the residents forum will be limited to 30 minutes in total. So it's 8:33 now. We'll end by 9:03.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Fish. I live at 3 Hilltop Lane, Flemington, New Jersey. Former graduate of Hunterdon Central High School, 1992. I have the pleasure of watching my daughter, who's currently a junior in high school, grow up to be a young adult and participate in a lot of the activities that Hunterdon Central has to offer. My daughter, as I know it, has only experienced 6 months of normalcy in high school. 6 months. She's a junior. Very recently, she was contact traced in the lunchroom and was asked to quarantine for 14 days. 2 of the kids sitting at the table were also contact traced, but they were allowed to go back to their classes because they were vaccinated. Today, my daughter's about 7 days into the quarantine. She's tested negative for COVID and has yet to be able to go back to school. Why? I have no idea. I have no idea. Furthermore, there is no mechanism in place to provide my daughter with the education that she needs in her most important year of high school, her junior year. 14 days of quarantine, no online training. I don't know who's responsible for making that kind of a decision. Somebody's got to take the blame for it. We had a year and a half with this pandemic. There was online training in place. Who's the responsible one for making the decision that we're going to discontinue online training in our classes for our students? Do you think this is the only time that a student's going to get contact traced? Where you have to send another student home for 14 days with no online training in place? It's so generous of you to offer tutoring from 4 to 6. Well, guess what? Some kids have a life outside of school. My daughter's active in gymnastics. She works at one of the local restaurants, doing her part for the public, learning responsibility. 4 to 6 doesn't work. You cannot strip my daughter from her right to an actual education. I get the quarantining thing. Fine. 14 days? I think it's ridiculous. It is what it is. At least give her the proper solution so she can learn like the rest of the kids that are able to stay in school. I don't think it's an unreasonable request at all. You have Tewksbury. They offer online training to their kids. You have Trenton High Schools. They offer online training to their kids when they have to send somebody home for quarantining. Make the right decision and reconsider it. This is a decision that you can make today, tonight. This has got to end. I hope you reconsider.
Thank you, Mr. Fish.
All right. So, with Jason just going,
Name and address, please.
my name is Wayne Fish. Address 4 Melbourne Lane, Ringgoes, New Jersey. 1988 graduate of Hunterdon Central High School. So, just to kind of go into detail, my son happened to be at the same table that where Jason was just talking about. So a couple of things just to really break it down for you guys. I mean, do you guys really understand like the kids' classes and how they're being run these days? For example, economic class, I have no issues with. Everything's good. He can have Google Docs. There's homework. There's whatever it is, whether it's books, and there's a lot of support for him, right? TV, let's look at that. No Google Docs, no books. Everything is hands-on and filming, all lecture. Interesting how we're going to handle that with no cameras in the classroom. Math. We had a great math presentation tonight. So, math, no books, no videos. Yes to Google Docs, but won't know how to do the new work because it's all presented in class. Great job with the math. History, all lecture, no books, no Zoom, some Google Docs, and what's available is based on lecture. That's going to be great for 14 days. Chemistry, all lecture, no books, worksheet is based on lecture, and no Google Docs. English, no books, yes to some Google Docs. Public speaking, no books, sometimes Google Docs. So, let's look at also what is provided for them. So Monday, there are some hours from 4 to 6 for math. So that's one block from 4 to 6. Wednesday, you can take advantage of some history. That's from 4 to 6, and then Wednesday there's another 4 to 6, and Tuesday for English there's 4 to 6. So some of your classes actually overlap on what's available for your kid if they're at home. So this past week, this is how everything went down, just in case people don't realize. So exposure was at lunch. I would actually be curious just to see video, and I don't know how big the lunch table is, but I don't know, CDC standard says 3 feet apart for more than 14 minutes. What else? So we got the call on Monday. We picked them up. And then that Monday, I actually talked to Mr. Brandt. Mr. Brandt was actually been the most helpful person through all this with getting Trevor some help. So I broke down all those classes to Mr. Brandt, and he sat there and listened to everything I had to say. And he actually was a big help. He went right to Trevor's a TV teacher. And during his class, he got to participate in class through a laptop or whatever they use for camera, so he can work with his group. So that Tuesday, I was told I would get someone get back to me. Nothing. Silence. Kids just been taken out of school for 14 days and dead air for a whole 24 hours. So the Wednesday, called Dr. Moore first thing in the morning, let him know I had an appointment for a COVID test, and that if providing a negative test, I would drop him off back at school the next day, because that would have been what CDC recommends as a normal guideline, which is the 5 days and negative test, and he could be allowed to participate. So that Wednesday got pretty interesting. I finally got him the negative test, 246, 247, called Moore again, reiterated my position that I'm dropping off my son the next day at school, and then I finally received the call back that Wednesday at 3:30. So, guys, just hearing your talks, I mean, our talk with you, Mr. Moore, was that specifically that you were following your New Jersey Department of Health recommendations. First off, as far as I read it, they are recommendations.
Please remember to adjust the board. Thank you.
It's guidance. It's recommendations. So it doesn't mean that you have to do it. There's guidelines and, recommendations. Well, let me tell you something. And then you followed that up with that you were not prepared for Orange. Is that not what you said to me?
Sir, we're here to hear your comments. This is
Yeah, I
not
want to know.
dialogue.
You said, did you flat out tell me you were, as a school, were not prepared for Orange? It's a simple yes or no.
Look, I appreciate it. I hear you. We can respond to you after. I
Okay.
don't have the information. I wasn't privy to a conversation. This is time to
Okay.
adjust the board.
All right, fine. So I was told that we were not prepared for Orange. Let me tell you, not prepared at this point in the game is an unacceptable response to me. Unacceptable. You said, oh, these changes took place October, whatever it was, 8th or whatever's printed on NJ Health's website. Well, let me tell you, back in April of last year, you had all your color designations and what to do. So to have everything that transpired over a year, a year and a half now, all summer long to work on this, and then to hear firsthand that there's nothing to be done for our kids and you're out for 14 days, I just find it totally unacceptable. Totally. Guess what? To have your head so far in the sand, you go now on a college visit. You know what they tell you? And you go around to these college visits, every classroom has a camera in it. So guess what? If you're not feeling good that day, stay home. You log in on your computer, and man, you're sitting in on class. That is not rocket science to me. That's an easy fix for all of this. Man, that would even come down to, let's say a student is like, man, Mom, I'm not feeling well today. You know what? Perfect. Stay home. You got a camera in. Log. That would maybe
Please
be a
remember to adjust the board.
preventative measure. I can look wherever I want to
Okay,
look.
just please remember to adjust the board.
So, I got to know, at this point, how come there's not new cameras in every classroom with audio that a person could just sit there and listen in on their class? Is it a money thing? Because if it's a money thing, and let me tell you, my son's active, varsity athlete in lacrosse and football. Man, we got nice new lights at the stadium. We got a couple new Gators all decked out in closed cabs. I'll take cameras in the classroom any day of the week over lights, new Gators for staff. It's saddening what's going on with our kids and what's not being provided. Meanwhile, and I'm going to get crap for this, but I'll say it anyways. It's like you're picking and choosing what you want to enforce. And to discriminate against our kids because we're not vaxxed. If you're going to kick kids out, you might as well kick the vax ones out too, because they're the ones that are spreading stuff right now. And you guys, what I mean by picking and choosing what you want to enforce, have you been over to the gym lately? Our own gym on campus. Now, my son goes there, but let me tell you, over there, it's right now you have football, lacrosse, and maybe another sport, soccer, all working out Gym is packed. Go and notice how many people wear masks. I thought it's a school policy that you have to have masks on campus. So right there, it's like you're picking and choosing what you want to, you know what, we're going to let that slide. We're not going to do it here, though. I just want to see my kid back in school and learning again. I'm just up to here, and to me, I don't claim to be the sharpest tool in the shed, but at this point in the game, not to have classrooms and audio, cameras in classrooms, I can't even fathom it with everything these kids have gone through. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I have to say they pretty much just said everything I was going to say.
Can you give me your name and address, please?
I'm sorry. Yes, Melissa Gardner, Flemington.
Thank you.
These gentlemen really kind of spoke for me and kind of took everything that I was going to say. I will say, Dr. Moore, I emailed you, and you did email me back December 8th, and I was very grateful for your email. My question is, after doing some research, it would seem that the information that Central is using is from the New Jersey Department of Health. I looked up that information. I looked up their website, and it states that this policy is as guidance. So when I see guidance, that tells me that it's not a mandate, it's not a law, and apparently I've heard the high schools in Somerville are not enforcing things like this. There's other schools that are also not following this. It seems like it's almost up to you guys to make these decisions, because a guidance is not a mandate. Now, I have two kids here at Central. I've had two that have moved on, very successful. One is in law school. It's a great school. I love it. It's done very well by my two older kids. And now I have two younger kids that are here, a sophomore and a junior. My sophomore is suffering as far as math goes, struggling. My other three kids, straight A students, doing fantastic. My junior daughter here, doing fantastic. My son, I worry about, okay? If he gets contact traced, which he did, actually in September, healthy, tested negative, he was fine. But it wasn't this 2-week policy that is happening now. If he gets contact traced for 2 weeks, he's going to fail. He's already failing a couple of classes. Like, this keeps me up at night. He cannot be contact traced and come home for 2 weeks without daily instruction that is on Zoom, that is something other than this 4 to 6, one subject every night, Monday through Thursday. That is a recipe for absolute failure in his life. And he's already struggling. And I don't understand the science behind 14 days. Where is that from? Really, I would love to know. Somebody, answer. 14 days. Healthy kids are sitting home with no instruction? I mean, I honestly feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone. It doesn't make any sense. Someone please make it make sense. That's all I ask in everything that's going on in this crazy world right now. Everything. Things have to make sense to me, or else, as you know, I've been here before. I speak out when things don't make sense to me. This one, thankfully, Matthew has not been contact traced since this new rule, and I pray at night that he doesn't. He had COVID. We all had COVID. I am not comfortable with him getting the vaccine. He's a healthy 15-year-old boy. I know the statistics. I obsess on research all the time. I'm not comfortable. There's no need for him to get it. So now he's going to be punished, and he's going to fail epically if, God forbid, he is contact traced. He's a healthy kid. There's no reason for any of these healthy kids that are contact traced to sit home for 2 weeks. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm asking all of you to please, can we go back to common sense and look at our kids and say, yeah, you're right, that doesn't make sense. There's no need for you to sit home for 2 weeks without proper instruction, unless we want our kids to fail. So please, look at this policy. It is not a mandate. You can change it. It is guidance. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner. All right, with no further comment,
Ask a question to you guys today?
I mean,
Like-
the board doesn't, I'm not going to sit here and answer questions because I'm not in the school operations every day, and this is a time for you to address the board. We'll respond to you with questions. It's not going to happen this dais, though. So if you have questions, by all means, throw them at us. We'll get an answer back to you, but I can't respond at this dais because I don't want to respond without having all the information.
Mr. Moore, as it being a recommendation, it's not a law. It's not a.
Respond, okay, well,
We'll wait until our appropriate time to speak.
yeah, I do have board comments and additional business upcoming. That's why I moved it to after public
Okay, I
comment,
got
because
you.
I wanted to hear that. So I hear you, I appreciate it. So I'm going to close residence forum at this time. I will say that, look, I do, and I know you're going to have comments. I might duplicate some of what you have to say here. I appreciate the feedback on the virtual learning, right? That's something that I can take back to committee and we can work on. The 14-day unvaccinated does not happen at this day. It's not a decision that this school board made. That's a decision at the state level. It's executive order that makes it mandatory. I'm not going to argue this. I'm not going to argue this, guys. Guys, I'm not going to argue this. Executive order makes it mandatory, so we're following it. I advocate almost every day with our legislatures because I find it ridiculous as well. I encourage you. You did a great job here on the video streaming. That I absolutely hear you and take those feedbacks to heart. But when it comes to the 14-day, advocate at the state level. They are the ones that make the guidance. They are the ones that make the executive orders. That is the appropriate. I'll connect with you after. That's what I have to say on it.
Yeah, and I can agree just with everything you've said. And in addition, agree with what we've heard about the thoughts that this is ridiculous. When I opened tonight with my comments talking about the need for the state to explore other arrangements, test and stay is the one that we feel has the most potential for us. But we are not at liberty to go out on that limb, given the guidance that we have from the Department of Health. I know you can look at this and you can see language like guidelines and recommendations and all of that, but we receive these instructions from the Department of Health and the Department of Education. And we are also, on the professional side of things, advocating for test and stay and some sense to come into this. Because I agree, 14 days is ridiculous. I totally agree with you. No opportunity to test back in seems ridiculous. I opened tonight talking about some of the adjustments we're making to increase the availability of online learning during the day. We're not going to do that universally every day, every minute. That's something that we need teachers to work on with the students who are out to decide when that's the most appropriate for those kids. Additional online tutorial in the Block 5 time period, continued evening tutorial, plus additional work like what Mr. Brandt's been doing with some students to help them organize their work over the 14 days. But I wholeheartedly agree. All of these things that we're doing are not as good as 14 days not being the rule. And when 14 days, if we can get some relief on that, then I think we'll be in a much better situation. When we were in yellow, we had 10 days, and you could return after 7 if you had a negative test. And that was manageable. Still wasn't great, but it was manageable. In states across the country, you have states that are allowing their students, if they're close contacts and unvaccinated, to remain in school as long as they show some negative testing over some periodic course of their period of interest. That's what we need in New Jersey. We're advocating for it. I know that's exactly. I'm hearing you kind of say the same thing. It's not sustainable. We were not prepared to go into orange in the sense that we didn't think that was coming this year. We didn't think that orange was coming this year. You can laugh all you want. We've gotten very good at predicting this. We have new variants. We have various situations. We are not seeing spread on campus. The spread we're seeing is outside of campus. We did not anticipate going back into a situation.
And if I may interrupt for a second too, you covered earlier some of the non-COVID factors that are
Yes.
contributing to this as well.
Yeah.
So those calculations are accurate. I think the people that are here operationally every day do a good job, and that's a testament to the fact that the kids that are home are healthy. Listen, I don't want them home. I want them here.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're healthy is the good work that these people every single day, the students, the staff, the administrators continue to do. What we need to do is advocate better because the 14-day with no test back is just, it's unacceptable.
That's
Sorry,
it.
I interrupted.
That's it. That's
Okay.
all right.
All right. Nobody else? Can I have a motion to adjourn to executive session for approximately 40 minutes for school security, HIB, personnel negotiations?
No.
Okay, I just put it on there. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Second, motion second, all in favor?